Welcome to Mum Abroad's YouTube channel, where I'm joined today by Sinéad Galvin. She's an Irish educational consultant, mum of three, and founder of Steps into Spain. Sinéad first came to Spain when she was 19 and fell in love with the place. Since then, she's lived in Granada, Barcelona, Tenerife, and Valencia. But for the past 15 years, Madrid has been her home. Sinéad gave up her teaching job a couple of years ago to devote her time to Steps into Spain, an educational consultancy for international families in Madrid. Hi, Sinéad.
Hi, Jane. How are you? Thank you so much for
Good.
inviting me to speak to you
Thank
today.
you. Thank you for joining me. Sinéad, first of all, what was it about Spain that captured your heart?
Whew. Let's see. I was 19 when I first came to Spain, so it's a completely different time of my life. I first came, I was in Granada and I was living with a Spanish family, going to a Spanish academy. And at that time, I thought it was fantastic to be able to be so much out on the street. And I think that's still one of the things I really like about Spain, the outdoor life. And then from Granada, I went on to Ibiza. I was 19 and I spent almost a year in Ibiza. And at that time, talking a very long time ago, it was like paradise. So I think it's probably the Spanish way of life in general, that it's quite relaxed, relatively. And it probably a lot has to do with the climate, not specifically that I want to stay out in the sun all the time, but that almost sunny almost every single day means I can be outdoors. Like even today, we're in November, end of November, and it's really cold outside, but it's a beautiful blue sky. It's bright, and I think that's probably one of my big things about Spain, and of course Spanish food and wine.
I have to agree. I love waking up to the sun shining, even if it's not hot outside.
Yeah.
You have that blue sky. It's bright, isn't it? It brightens your day.
It makes you feel like, okay, I'm going to do something today. Whereas, I'm Irish, and it rains a lot in Ireland. So it's kind of, and it can be quite tedious.
So, as you said, you were young and single when you first came to Spain, and then later on, you were here with your family. So, did you find that you had to kind of readapt or adapt in a different way once you had
Most definitely.
kids here?
My eldest daughter, I've been in Madrid probably for about 16 years, but on and off. I moved to London as well for 5 years with my husband. He's from here, he's from Madrid. And we had our eldest daughter, she was born in London. So when we came back, I was like, okay, now this is Madrid in a totally different light. This is why Madrid, where I was spending a lot of time on playgrounds. Whereas before I never looked at playgrounds. I never looked for playgrounds. I found streets that are pedestrianized on a Sunday morning that I never knew that these streets even, that this sort of thing existed. So yeah, everything changed, but I suppose it changes inevitably no matter where you live. But I think as well, what was quite nice, because same in London, it wasn't as easy to do things with her eldest daughters. Whereas when we came back to Madrid, it was really easy to fit her in kind of with everything that we wanted to do. We wanted to go to a restaurant, or we want to go to a museum, or anything that we wanted to do. She was very much accepted. I think in Spain in general, they do really like kids, and are very inviting and very welcoming.
How was your experience of choosing schools for your own children?
I think probably we had a bit of an advantage in that we were already living, especially my husband's from here, but we were already living in Madrid. And I speak Spanish, and obviously my husband speaks Spanish. So that made it wasn't as difficult as it can be for other families that are new to Spain or new to Madrid that aren't even familiar with the education system. I'd already worked in Spanish schools for a number of years, so I was very familiar with how the education system worked, the different types of schools that were available, how the bilingual program worked, which is pushed quite a lot in a lot of the schools. And I think we were very clear on what we didn't want. And by filtering out what we didn't want, it made it a lot easier to find the school that we wanted. And now there are 3 kids are at the school. They're aged 3, 5, and 7, and they love their school. But I think probably all children that age love school. Really,
Well,
it's as they get older.
But yeah, a lot of them do. Yeah,
they look forward to going to school.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of one of the most important things at that age, isn't it? That they're happy.
Of course, definitely. And I think when they're that little, it's that they're happy. There's a social aspect. I think that's what was one of the terrible. In Spain, I think in that respect, we were very lucky during COVID. That it was obviously the March to June, whenever it all exploded. Okay, the kids had online teaching, but all last year, kids went to school, in-person classes. Whereas a lot of my clients, that are moving from overseas, the kids haven't had in-person classes for over a year and a half. Okay, academically they're okay. They've kept up with the academic side of things, but the social aspect, especially for young kids, it's something really important.
I think it's almost more important than the academics, isn't it, when they're
Yep.
so young?
Most definitely, definitely. Because I think inevitably when they're little, if they're happy at school, everything else will flow from there.
Sinead, you set up Steps into Spain, combining your professional experience as a teacher and also your personal experience as a mother, as we've just talked about. What was it exactly that made you decide that you wanted to help other families?
I mean, I think I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to work with the British Council and La Comunidad de Madrid and to teach English in Spanish public schools, which allowed me to understand how it actually worked, because of course it's different to what I'm used to, and to understand the timetable, the facilities, age groups, lots of different ins and outs of the school. And not only that allowed me, I mean, my friends were constantly asking me about what is the public school, how does it work, and how does it compare to the other schools, and also talking to my colleagues, and they were able to give me their perspective in other schools that they were working at. And then friends of friends of friends of friends. Every time I went somewhere, I was being asked about schools, and I think it kind of surprised me that this information wasn't readily available online. There's a huge amount of information available, but it's really specific to each school. Whereas what they wanted really was a more overview to understand the workings of the education system, the schools, and I think that was what set my mind thinking. Okay, I think there could be an opportunity here. So when I finished up at this school, when my contract ended, that's when I started this little project, my fourth baby, Steps into Spain, and to really help families, because it's such a big deal. School is a massive part of, not even if you're moving to another country, but even living here on a day-to-day basis. The children or kids spend more than a third of their day at school, it's actually one third of their day at school. So I mean, if they're not happy at school, you're not happy. It's a massive part of finding a good balance for the family. That is, they need to be happy at school.
And it's not just about families who are relocating here.
Mm.
You could be living here and your kids
Yeah.
go to one school and you're not happy with the school and you need to find somewhere else, and you need help with that with that move
That
as
happened.
well.
Exactly, and that happens quite a bit too. Sometimes it can be, say, maybe international, that maybe one is Spanish and another is from another country, and they just need to try and understand how it works. Or it can be families that are living here and their child has a specific requirements that they really aren't able to get. They can't find any information online, and it can be that maybe there's some sort of a learning difficulty, or it can be several reasons. There's several ways that have reasons that a family could get in contact with me. But yeah, you're right. It's families either living here or families that are moving over.
What would you say are the big things that stand out about the Spanish education system? And here I mean, what are the differences that foreigners ought to be aware of or need to be aware of?
I think there's quite a lot, but the differences. Let's see. One of my constant gripes is that all my three children are November and December babies. And the way it works here in Spain is that the kids will go to school based on the year that they were born. So all the kids that were born in, all the kids from January to December will all go to school that same year, that September. Of course, for the kids in January, they come at 3 years of age. Some of the kids are almost about to turn 4, and other children haven't even turned 3. Obviously, it's the case of my kids, so that's why I'm much more aware of this one. And I just find 12 months is a huge difference. Obviously, in my experience as well from schools, it does balance out. When they get to about segundo, tercero de primaria, it does balance. But at the beginning of 3 years of age or 4 years of age, it's something that you can really tell the difference of the kids that are the older ones and the younger ones. Another difference, I think, and it's probably not such a difference for the UK or people that are coming from the UK or from the US, but the idea of a concertado school. A concertado is like the semi-private school. In the UK, US, you've got the charter school or I think it's a grammar school. But in other countries, there's a public school or there's a private school. There isn't this in between that's partly public, partly private. It doesn't exist. But here in Spain, obviously, there is the concertado school. Another one, and this happens quite a lot with their lunch. the days are long. It's a 9 to 5. It's a long day, but the kids inevitably they get used to it. And it does make working life for working parents a lot easier. But the idea that they would just grab a quick sandwich is unheard of. I mean, all of the kids that go to school here, they have a 3-course meal, and they have some bread and they have a drink. And if it's a special day, well, they might have an ice cream, or it's a big deal, and I like that. And then obviously it makes, as a mom and a working mom, it makes my life a lot easier as well, because dinner then isn't such a massive deal. I know that they've had a good meal in the daytime. Kids begin to learn another language when they're 3, which is fantastic. They begin, at least in Madrid, in the bilingual schools, children as young as 3 are already learning English. They're spending an hour a day learning English. Which obviously, it's relative. It's singing or dancing, but at least it's their first exposure to another language. I think is quite it's quite important. I think it's quite a nice thing, a good thing. So yeah, there's some.
Just to clarify, when you talk there about bilingual schools, you're talking about state schools which are bilingual, and presumably that's not all of state schools. That's certain state schools.
It's the way, say, the state schools and the concertado schools both follow the same bilingual program, because they're both obviously they're both managed by the state. And in Madrid, we've probably got about 50% are what you call bilingual being Spanish and English, and 50% that are non-bilingual. And say the private schools, then obviously their bilingual program is completely different. They will have more hours. They will spend more hours on English. But what's happening now in Madrid is that it's becoming much more difficult to find a non-bilingual school. The government here in Madrid are really, really pushing the bilingual schools.
And what would you, put you on the spot here a little bit, but how would you say is the level of English teaching in those bilingual schools?
The public and the concertado, it really depends on the school. And unfortunately, sometimes it depends on the area. And it shouldn't be like that, but the nicer or the more affluent areas will probably have, like, in general, a higher level of teaching, a better level of teaching. What is the level? I mean, it's good in the way. I think it's a great idea that the kids have such a huge number of hours dedicated to learning English, and that the English language, that they spend such a big part of their timetable dedicated to that. I still am not too sure if I think it's such a good idea that the kids also do the naturales or they do science subjects in English. I don't think I see what the big advantage of learning the parts of their body or different things in English and not knowing them in Spanish. And then that later at homes, if their parents are, if they're struggling, well, then they've got to try and translate it. And I think what would be the idea with a bilingual program is that it's more hours dedicated to the English language, rather than trying to up your hours in English by choosing other subjects to teach through in English.
What would you say are the positive aspects of the Spanish education system?
I think the positive aspects would be that definitely it's, say when the kids are little, say when they're in infants and in primary, the first 2 years of primary, I mean, they go to school quite young. Something I should have actually mentioned earlier as well. From 3 until 6, they're in infants, and it really is, kind of continuation of nursery. It's really nice that they spend all of those 3 years with the same teacher. I think it's a really good way that the teacher is able to then see, okay, this is Juan or Sophie, or I can see, they can, if there's an issue, that those issues can be picked up quite quickly, because it's the same teacher that's been with them for the last 3 years. And then again in primary, in most of the primary schools, it's every 2 years, they spend the same 2 years. They spend 2 years with that same teacher. So they have quite good bonds with their teacher. And that's another thing, that students generally have great relationships with their teacher. The student-teacher relationship is very, it's very, hugs and kisses, and it's a first name basis, which some families are a bit kind of, ooh, what's this? Whereas I think it's lovely. I think it's a very positive thing, And I also think that their exposure to another language is a good thing in Spanish education.
Hey, so you've touched on state schools, concertada schools, and then of course there are international schools. Mm-hmm. What's the choice of international schools like in Madrid?
Wow, there's everything, really. And I think that's sometimes why people can be a little bit overwhelmed or a little bit kind of lost with all of the choices, because you've got British, American, French, Swiss, Swiss, Swedish. There's a Japanese school, and that's it. So there's the kind of the those are some of the schools. Then you've got the more alternative schools, which would be the Waldorf schools, the Montessori schools, Reggio schools, the active schools, and then you've got religious schools. There's a Jewish school. There's a huge number of schools, and of course, then you've got the IB schools. So I mean, you've probably got 30 schools that you can choose from. So it can be overwhelming. I think sometimes it would be almost easier for families if there was just 4 international schools, and then it's like, okay, I'll do my research for 4 schools. But there's a huge number, so you kind of think, oh my goodness, is it the right choice? Am I making the right choice? So you've got everything.
Too much choice is often a bad thing, isn't it? Not necessarily a good thing.
But I mean, that's where obviously Steps into Spain comes in. So
of course.
I help those families.
So with so much choice then, where or how do you begin the process of choosing a school? So what would you say are the most important things to consider?
I mean, I think for each family, a family has to be really clear on what it is that they, what is it that's important to them? Is it that the school has X number of hours dedicated to languages or to sports? Does it have to be close to their house? Those sort of things. And then it's that once you have your list, okay, this is what I really want. These are my top 5 things I want in a school. Then it makes a search. At least you're able to begin your search and you've filtered out a huge number of schools. Once they have that, then I think that they have to start speaking to the schools and try and visit the schools. But apart from that, they should try and speak to parents, because obviously each school is going to say, yes, your child is going to be very welcome and is going to get on really well in my school. And a school can be fantastic, but it might not be suitable for that child for whatever reason. And families need to be aware, what is it that they want, and as well what they don't want. What has worked in the past, and as well, where are they going to go in the future? Will they be staying in Madrid for a year? Is it 2 years? Do they want to get them into the Spanish education system, or is it something that they're a family that moves quite regularly? But yeah, I think what it is, they need to be really clear on what it is that they want and what they don't want, and to speak to the school, parents, try and get other points of view about the school. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of research.
And I guess the localized Facebook groups are good for asking other parents' opinions, for getting reviews from
Most
schools,
definitely.
aren't they?
Yeah, and in Madrid, I mean, we've got quite a few. There's one which is kind of a mom and dad in Madrid, and we've got another one which is the Madrid Education Facebook group. And I actually set that up with another colleague, and it's only on schools. Well, schools, education, everything focused on education in Madrid and it's for parents of school-age children. So it's a lot of families that are moving, or families that are living here, and for whatever reason they're moving, they want to change schools, so they ask advice, and it's a good way to get additional information. The only thing is that everybody always needs to be aware what works. Like what I mentioned, a school might work for one child, but it might not necessarily work for another child, and that's not sometimes the reason of the school. It can just be it's a difference of personality. So the Facebook groups are a great way to get another layer of information, but each family needs to be aware what their child is like as well, and will that really work for their child. But in Madrid, in that sense, we've got some great Facebook groups that are really, really helpful.
What do you find are the biggest worries for parents when they come to you and they start this process of finding schools?
I think a lot, it depends on the age group. If they've got young kids, it's a lot about will they make friends? Will they be happy at their school? So they tend to try and look for schools that are closer to their house, because obviously we all know when you've had young kids, you've got to go to play dates and parks and things like that. So it's a lot about, will they be happy? Will they make friends at that school? And then as they get older, it's kind of, okay, we're thinking about this kind of school or this kind of education, because this is what we see what's going to be in the future. The decision, it becomes a little bit more serious at that point. And it's kind of academically, what will that school suit my child, and will that help my child to decide what that my child wants to do in the future? Will it help them on their journey?
And finally, what do you love about your work?
Several things. I mean, obviously, I love meeting the families. I love really finding out all the different things, and then kind of, okay, I think this could work and this could work. What my job allows me to do is that I'm still involved in education, but it's a lot more flexible. I get to meet a lot more people, and I get to, rather than just being involved with one school, I get to visit all the schools. And I visited probably about 40 schools in Madrid, and I still have way more schools to visit. You know, it's a huge number of schools. Those are points of my job that I like, but I think the thing that makes me feel really grateful for what I do is that each time that I help a family choose the right school for their child, when I get back in contact with them once they've started at school, they say, "Oh, Sinead, our child is so happy here. It's the most perfect fit," and it's like, yes. You know, I kind of think sometimes they kind of become even like my own children, but not my own. But it's I worry, will it, you know, will they be okay at the school? Will it work for them? And when they get back with me and it's like, yes, it's worked, it's like, yes, it's a great feeling of satisfaction.
It's quite a sense of responsibility, isn't it, for you?
Yeah, it is. But I mean, that's why, you know, it takes time to find the right school. It's not something that a family can get in contact with me and within like 4 days I've got the schools for them. I don't, because it takes time. And you know, I as well, even though I visited the schools, I'm always in contact with the schools because things change at the schools. You know, and it can be that the principal has changed or something has changed, and that can change the entire dynamic of the school. So it's constantly, you know, finding to be updated on the how the school is moving, how it's progresses. It's still the same, and that takes time. So it takes time to find the right school, but it's I enjoy it.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Sinead. I'm going to put at the bottom of the screen your website address, which is www.stepsintospain.es. And if people go to the website, they will find your contact details, so your phone number and your email address. And you mentioned a moment ago about your Facebook group, so perhaps you could just say what that was again.
Yeah, it's Madrid Education. So if you put in the search engine at Facebook, Madrid Education, our Facebook group will pop up. And you need to become a member because it's a private group, but the member consists of answering 3 very simple questions. And thank you very much, Jane, for having me today. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.